about the military perspective to what you have heard so far. Both the speakers, they have laid the ground for me to take off, now bring in the military part of it. So how I'm going to do it, I'm going to give you a small presentation for the better assimilation. Let me see if I can. Oh.
Share your screen, sir, you get it.
It's not coming up.
You have to share your screen, sir. There is a
the share screen.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. The share screen icon is not coming up.
Is it?
Okay, here it is. Multiple participant can see something. The advanced share options.
Yeah, share screen is there. Amresh, you have to enable him.
I think there's some software problem. Kindly enable me.
Amresh.
Yeah.
Now you try, sir.
Yeah, I'm trying that.
I have said one participant, so I'll request the others, if they are by mistake pressing the share screen button, not to do so. Yeah, it's coming, sir. You have to double click on it, sir, if you want to enter full screen. Yeah, it's come, sir.
It's come.
It's come?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, can you all see it?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. So here I go. My presentation, the heading, what I've given out as was directed by General Chaturvedi. Aspirations of armed forces for structural upgradation, budget and industry user interface.
That's right.
Now let's see what aspirations are function of security environment. That is one. Threat dynamics and consequent operational metrics. And in that, the role of industry is to provide the structural strength to the armed forces for national power projection. This point has already been brought out by Mr. Rai very well. Now let us see just quick scan over what is the security environment. I'll talk about the doctrinal mismatches. Our territorial disputes against Pakistan as well as China, they are in mountains, but we have no strike capability and concomitant infrastructure for its application. It is the biggest gap that we have in our complete defense structure. The offensive content is designed against Pakistan, and that too in the settled international borders. Our doctrine is that in case there is a war with Pakistan, we capture a lot of territory and bring them to a negotiating table, and thereafter we dictate our terms. How correct it would be in the present day environment is something that we have to think about. Now, all three nations, India, Pakistan, and China, they are nuclear capable countries. So therefore, there is a nuclear deterrence in place. What it means? It means it impacts on the conventional window and restricts our conventional options. Earlier, when there were Pakistan and India, they were not nuclear powers. That time, one could carry on with the operations and any amount of time, but now the window is very, very restricted. Yet, despite all the restrictions and the lack of options, China and Pakistan, they're indulging in calculated conventional posturing and exploiting the sub-conventional domain, taking advantage of socio-political differentials of India that we all know. Now, this is something we have to take care. That means both these countries, China as well as Pakistan, our deterrence is not working. So we have to upgrade the deterrence. And this deterrence can only be upgraded by upgrading and modernizing our armed forces. Now the new factor that is emerging, that is a hybrid warfare. It's a non-contact variant, and it goes beyond military domain, impacting the national civic infrastructure targeting civilian population. Now you have seen recently what is happening in Ukraine. That Russia has been using hybrid warfare to the hilt. So let's see what is the threat. There is a cohesive threat from China and Pakistan combined in all the dimensions: nuclear, conventional, sub-conventional, and hybrid domain. There is an increased military entry due to multinational strategic interests in Indian Ocean region and also Indo-Pacific partly, but I'm restricting myself to Indian Ocean region. That's where our main interest lies. Now, this has diluted the Indian domination of the sea space of security concern with its inimical connotations. Now, this is something the naval front has got to be empowered henceforth. The increasing Chinese influence in the smaller nations all around us on our periphery, and there's a string of pearls in the ocean. Now there is a military angle to it, and we cannot ignore it. It may be benign in certain countries as of now, but we cannot ignore that silent threat, and we have to ensure that armed forces are ready for it. And lastly, the societal dissent in the democratic setup that we have. The internal security is a very big challenge, as you all know, in Jammu and Kashmir, Northeast and Red Corridor. Therefore, what are aspirations? There is a need of doctrinal realignment, that is one, and upgradation of structural strength of the national security mechanism, in which armed forces play a major role. When we say national security mechanism, it includes everybody, and with the hybrid warfare, even every citizen is part of this war. So let us see what is the aspiration matrix. Armed forces need to gradually shift from defensive to offensive doctrine over land, air, sea, and to create credible military deterrence. Now, this is a major issue. It will take a lot of time. It will require a lot of finances, and it will require a teamwork from all the facets of Government of India and individuals. The army, in particular, to seek ways to increase its offensive capability in mountains alongside existing strike forces in plain sectors and deserts. Air Force, to fill up the existing deficiencies in its combat fleet, which we all know, and they have to be technologically advanced so as to defeat the enemy forces. As far as Navy is concerned, they have to increase its strength and operational reach for national power projection to distant shores and seas of interest. Therefore, we do need additional cadre groups and its army and air component. This is very, very important. This is naval forces have got to be upgraded. And lastly, enhanced national structure for cyber, space, satellite, and all other hybrid domains. What does it involve? It involves creating a punitive deterrence in conventional domain and enhance its effectiveness to deal with the hybrid component by how we can do it. Upgrade the infrastructure in negative terrain, that is in mountains, roads, bridges, airstrips, helipads, so as to have the better op logistics and better reach and more options that we can create. Then reorient and reorganize the existing combat component through theaterization of the forces to maximize the combat potential of existing force structures. Carry out new raisings where required and empowerment through technology. And modernization of weapon and equipment profile to achieve battlefield transparency, night enablement, network centricity, enhanced ranges and lethality, terrain compatibility of the equipment, and force protection and jointness of the forces. These are basic tenets that we have to work on. So to do all this was the preamble. To do all this, what needs to be done? Aspire to achieve technological edge across entire spectrum of weapon and equipment. It is very, very necessary. And that's where the industry comes in. We need to create culture of innovation and research and development. For that, we have to widen the scope beyond government establishments, that is DRDO and ordnance factories, and we need to fill up the technology gap. It's not an easy proposition, but we must start our endeavors towards this. Now, the second point, this is Mr. Vivek Rai also emphasized the time-sensitive procurement procedure so as to beat the technology redundancies. A lot of work has got to be done. Water acquisition and procurement procedures are there. They need to be modified, keeping pace with the technological advancements. This is something is a big challenge, and as a team, we have to do this. Since the arms suppliers are likely to part with their cutting-edge technologies, there is a need to develop in-house capabilities. And for that, there are certain suggestions. And these are, firstly, joint ventures with the foreign companies. Opt for Make for India by the foreign manufacturers till we fully graduate to Make in India. Though, like Mr. Vivek Rai also said, we obviously cannot have 100% Make in India. It has got to be mix and match of foreign technology and our own technology. Involve Indian diaspora of foreign scientists to boost the national technological capability. We must hire them whatever be the cost. And import cutting edge technologies where essential, even at the high costs. So we have to take certain hard decisions, and which has got a lot of financial implications. We have to, as a nation, we have to be prepared for it. And we have to improve structural strength of defense industry to achieve objective of self-reliance. Now, this is the most important and the mainstay of today's seminar. We have to encourage the private industry to participate alongside public sector. They have proven credentials in non-military fields. They can do it even in a military field, provided we create a level playing field to the private sector and provide them a fair competitive market. We must increase the scope of purchase of products from private enterprises through appropriate protective policies. Like government has restricted them around 200 plus items, items of equipment. It is a negative list that published, means these have to be purchased from the Indian vendors. Reduce the overheads for the manufacturing processes, including provision of technologies and testing facilities for quality assurance. This is what the private sector. Liberal financial incentives to the private industry, startups, and academia. Facilitate infrastructure for development of defense production entities at one place for ease of logistics, ancillaries, supply chain, and markets. And that's where defense industrial corridors come in. Synergize the defense production market through policy framework in order to create economies of scales and future growth for self-reliance. Now here the government has to be a facilitator in a very big way. And a lot is being done, and the present budget is a beginning to showcase the government mind towards this and provide government support to facilitate exports of surplus production of the private sector. A look at defense budget recently, which has been announced. It is a positive approach. The government approach is to facilitate self-reliance. 25% of R&D allocations exclusively for the private sector, startups, and academic research, so as to create culture of innovation and fill up the technology gap. This is a model what is being adopted in foreign countries. 68% of capital purchases from indigenous sources. This is primarily to encourage Indian industry and infuse confidence among private sector. More than 200 items have been placed in negative list. Now, government has set a target of 10% increase in defense production in this current financial year. It is quite a pragmatic target. Last year, it was around 58%. Now, this is 68%. Private sector should be permitted to use government testing and certification facilities. All this time, they have been going to the private vendor, foreign countries, which results in a lot of financial loss to them. Now, liberal financial incentives to small and medium enterprises and startups. These are the people who can come up with the ancillary units and small projects to aid on to the bigger projects. The tax incentives to private sector and startups, that goes without saying. And now ordnance factories, they have been reformatted into 7 DPSUs. So let us see how this experiment proves to. The government is to facilitate joint ventures with the foreign OEMs and well-established Indian industrial houses. And government is to seek markets for Indian products in foreign countries. So all our foreign missions have to be geared for this. And creating defense industrial corridors to bring the requisite facilities, structures, and support systems to make it convenient for private industry to grow and contribute towards national defense production. Now, this concept of defense industrial corridor, which Brigadier Amulya is going to elaborate more, this is something, this is the basic brick for our modernization. Now, as far as defense production, industry, and user interface, the previous speakers has talked about it in details, giving example of foreign countries also. It is important to establish the objectivity and focus of defense industry. This is very, very important. Mr. Vivek also focused on this issue. And what does consumer want? That is what does armed forces they want? So we have to increase the interaction with the industry and the user, that is armed forces. So therefore, there is a need to increase the interaction between the armed forces and the industry. Have a relook at the restrictive policies, as there is sufficient information in the open domain in the military matters. The security cover that we are giving to our weapon and equipment, now that has got to be, we have to give a relook to it in case we want to move forward. We have to conduct production-oriented seminars, wherein we invite, they are already been conducted, where we invite the private industry to come and participate. Briefings on operational needs or qualitative requirements of equipment for research and development and subsequent manufacture to the selected industries. Involving industry in feasibility discussions from technology and industrial capability perspective. What happens, we make qualitative requirements so tough, it is very difficult for industry to meet those requirements. So we have to take industry on board while we are trying to evolve these GSQRs. And we have to reduce the bottlenecks in decision-making and procurement procedures with participation of industry where required. Now, this is a very loaded bullet that I have given here. We may like to have a collegiate system for in-house decision instead of linear model that we have. There is a scope of improving it. Posting of military officers in relevant departments of the government to provide hands-on advice on all matters of military equipment, technology, and organizational needs. Need to bring in more flexibility in procedures and financial prudence under competent authorities of Government of India. And need of training of military and civil officers and scientists as a specialist cadre for procurement process and procedures. This is something we need to go in for, because what happens means officers who have no idea of procurement, they'll end up in army headquarters and thereafter they're pushing the files. Now we do require specialists, and it is a teamwork with the MOD, with the scientists, with the military officers and the civil administrative officers. All together, they have to sit and decide as a specialist cadre in this matter. We have to enhance the interaction involvement of academic institutions and scientific research establishments. And we have to provide the military advisors to industry and R&D establishments, serving as well as retired domain experts may be deputed for this. In the end, my parting slide is Defense Industrial Corridor is all about facilitating environment and support systems for developing defense industry structures to achieve objectives of Atmanirbhar Bharat as an intrinsic component of national security mechanisms. I finish my presentation here. Jai Hind.